Snowflakes dance through Boston's bitter December air as James Miller hunches against the cold, his weathered Marine Corps jacket offering little warmth. On this Christmas Eve, while families gather in warm homes, the homeless veteran sits alone on a bench in Boston Common. His mind drifts to battles fought in distant lands, but tonight's battle is against the freezing darkness. Then, a stranger approaches through the swirling snow. The man sits beside him, holding a small box that will change everything. This isn't just any stranger. It's Keanu Reeves. Marine Staff Sergeant James Miller never imagined he'd end up on a cold bench in Boston Common. At 42, his face carries the weathered marks of a man who's seen too much. His military career spanned 12 proud years, including 2 grueling tours in Afghanistan's unforgiving terrain. The crisp efficiency of his Marine Corps training still shows in his straight posture, even as he huddles against the December wind. Before the streets claimed him, James led a team of 20 Marines through some of the most dangerous regions of Helmand Province. His men trusted him with their lives, and he brought them all home. But during his second tour, an IED blast changed everything. While James survived physically, the explosion took something else from him: his peace of mind. The memories hit him at unexpected moments. A car backfiring sends him diving for cover. The whump-whump of helicopter blades from the nearby hospital makes his hands shake. Crowded spaces become combat zones in his mind. The VA diagnosed him with severe PTSD, but the prescribed treatments never quite reached the depth of his wounds. Civilian life proved harder than any combat mission. The skills that kept him alive in war zones didn't translate to office jobs. His marriage crumbled under the weight of his nightmares and anger. His wife Sarah took their daughter Emma to live with her parents in California. The last Christmas card they sent showed Emma missing her front teeth, grinning at the camera. That was 3 years ago. The downward spiral accelerated after he lost his job as a security guard. The apartment went next, then his car. His savings drained away like water through cupped hands. Now home is wherever he can find shelter, doorways, abandoned buildings, and on better nights, the Veterans Shelter on Washington Street. But the shelter's strict no-alcohol policy keeps him away more often than not. The whiskey doesn't help the memories, but it mutes them enough to sleep. Yet even at his lowest, James never completely lost the leader he once was. The other homeless veterans in the area know him as someone who watches out for them. He shares what little food he can find, warns them about dangerous places to sleep, and sometimes just listens to their stories. They're his new unit now, fighting a different kind of war on these urban streets. Every morning, James walks the same route through Boston Common, collecting discarded cans and bottles. The recycling center pays enough for a meal, sometimes 2 if he's lucky. He knows which coffee shops throw away day-old pastries and which restaurant workers might slip him leftovers. The public library provides warmth during the day and a chance to stay connected through their computers. He sends weekly emails to Emma that he never hit send on, saving them to drafts instead. The old James Miller, the Marine who led men with confidence and purpose, feels like a character in someone else's story now. But glimpses of that man surface when he helps a fellow veteran navigate the VA bureaucracy or when he breaks up fights at the shelter. His hands, once steady on a rifle, now shake as he holds out a cup for spare change. But his eyes still scan his surroundings with military precision, old habits refusing to die. The other regulars of Boston Common know James by sight. The coffee cart vendor who sometimes gives him free coffee, the joggers who no longer change paths to avoid him, the business people who occasionally stop to talk. They see a tall man with graying temples and alert eyes, wearing a worn Marine Corps jacket that still kept as clean as possible. What they don't see are the medals packed carefully in a waterproof bag at the bottom of his backpack, or the folded flag that was his father's, or the silent battles he fights every day to keep moving forward. Boston Common transforms into a winter wonderland as Christmas Eve settles over the city. The centuries-old trees wear fresh coats of snow, their branches draped in twinkling white lights that mirror the stars appearing in the darkening sky. Children's laughter echoes from the Frog Pond skating rink, where families spin and glide across the ice, creating memories that will warm them for years to come. James watches from his bench near the Soldiers and Sailors Monument, its granite surface dusted with snow. The bronze figures of Union soldiers seem to stand even more solemnly in the gathering darkness, silent guardians of another generation's sacrifices. The scent of roasted chestnuts and hot chocolate drifts from nearby vendors, mixing with the crisp winter air. These smells stir memories of Christmases past, his mother's kitchen in Springfield, the sugar cookies Emma once insisted on leaving for Santa, the mulled wine Sarah used to make. Tourist families hurry past, wrapped in expensive winter gear, cameras capturing the picturesque scene. They barely notice the scattered figures huddled in doorways and on benches, the invisible people who call the common home when darkness falls. Old Tom has already claimed his usual spot behind the visitor center, his shopping cart loaded with everything he owns. Maria, a Vietnam-era army nurse, sits on a heating grate near the Park Street station, humming carols under her breath. The temperature continues to drop as evening approaches. Weather reports warned of record lows tonight, the kind of cold that can kill if you're not careful. James stamps his feet to keep the blood flowing, watching his breath form clouds in the frigid air. The shelters will be packed tonight. He gave up his usual spot at the Pine Street Inn to a young veteran with a bad cough, knowing the kid wouldn't survive a night in this weather. Church bells ring out across Beacon Hill, calling the faithful to Christmas Eve services. The sound carries clearly in the winter air, mixing with distant sirens and the rumble of subway trains underground. James remembers midnight mass with his family, standing shoulder to shoulder in the warm church, voices raised in familiar hymns. Now the bells mark time's passage in a different way, counting down the hours until another Christmas dawns. Most of the tourists have gone now, hurrying home to waiting festivities. The common grows quieter, street lights casting long shadows across the snow-covered paths. A few late-night dog walkers pass by, their pets' paws leaving tracks in the fresh powder. The wind picks up, finding every gap in James's layers of clothing, every worn spot in his old jacket. He pulls his worn red socks cap lower over his ears, tucking his hands into his armpits for warmth. The city skyline glows against the night sky, office buildings and luxury apartments blazing with light. Through countless windows, James can see Christmas trees twinkling, families gathering, celebrations in full swing. The contrast between their warmth and his solitude feels sharper tonight than usual. Yet something keeps him rooted to this spot, unable or unwilling to seek better shelter. Perhaps it's the strange feeling that's been growing stronger as the evening wears on, a sense that tonight might somehow be different from all the other cold nights he's endured. James notices the approaching figure through the curtain of falling snow, a tall silhouette moving with purpose across the empty common. Most people hurry past the park's remaining occupants, eyes averted, quickening their steps. But this man walks differently, unhurried despite the biting cold, his path leading directly to James's bench. The stranger wears a simple black wool coat, dark jeans, and boots that have seen better days. No designer labels or flashy accessories, just practical clothes for a winter night. His hair falls past his shoulders, and a neatly trimmed beard shadows his face. There's something familiar about him, but James can't place it through the swirling snow. Without asking permission, the man sits down on the other end of the bench. The wood creaks beneath his weight. He doesn't immediately speak or look at James, just gazes out at the snow-covered park. The silence stretches between them, not uncomfortable but expectant, like the pause between lightning and thunder. When the stranger finally turns, James recognizes him instantly. The face has appeared on countless movie posters, magazine covers, and viral videos about random acts of kindness. Keanu Reeves. James straightens instinctively, military bearing taking over, but the actor's posture remains relaxed, unthreatening. "Beautiful night," Keanu says, his voice carrying that distinctive gentle rumble. He gestures at the falling snow, the ice-draped trees, the empty path stretching into darkness. No pretense, no artificial cheer, just a simple observation shared between two people. James nods, unsure how to respond. His throat feels tight, unused to casual conversation after so many days of near silence. He watches Keanu from the corner of his eye, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Is this some kind of publicity stunt? A camera crew about to emerge from behind the trees? But no cameras appear. No smartphones record their interaction. Just two men sharing a bench on Christmas Eve, while the city sleeps behind drawn curtains and locked doors. Keanu's breath clouds in the freezing air as he continues to study the winter landscape. "Marine Corps?" he asks, nodding at James's jacket. The question carries genuine interest, respect. James has heard that tone before, in the voices of other veterans. It's the sound of someone who understands, even if they haven't worn the uniform themselves. "Yes, sir. 2 tours in Afghanistan." The words come easier than James expected. Something about the actor's quiet presence draws them out naturally, without pressure or judgment. Keanu nods again, letting the information settle. I played a Marine once, in a movie, he says with a self-deprecating smile. Learned enough to know how far short Hollywood falls from the real thing. How long were you in? 12 years. James finds himself relaxing slightly, the familiar territory of military service providing solid ground. Staff Sergeant, 2nd Battalion, 8th Marines. A comfortable silence falls again. Keanu pulls something from his coat pocket, a small silver flask. He takes a sip and offers it to James. The gesture feels natural, unforced. No hidden agenda, just one human sharing warmth with another on a cold night. The whiskey burns going down, but it's good stuff, much better than James's usual fare. He hands the flask back with a murmured thanks. Their fingers brush during the exchange, and James realizes the actor's hands are as cold as his own. Keanu's been out here a while, maybe walking the empty streets, maybe looking for something, or someone. I met a lot of Marines while researching that role, Keanu continues, tucking the flask away. Heard their stories, saw their struggles after coming home. Some of the bravest people I've ever known. He pauses, choosing his next words carefully. Also met quite a few who ended up on streets like these. The observation hangs in the air between them. No pity in his voice, no condescension, just recognition of a hard truth they both understand. James feels seen for the first time in months, not as a problem to be solved or a charity case to ease someone's conscience, but as a human being with a story worth hearing. Keanu reaches into his coat again, this time withdrawing a small box wrapped in simple red paper. No bow, no fancy decoration. He holds it for a moment, then extends it toward James with the same casual grace he showed with the flask. I had a feeling I might find someone who could use this tonight, he says quietly. Someone who's carried more than their share of weight for all of us. James stares at the offered box, his hands remaining stubbornly at his sides. Pride wars with need, dignity with desperation. The man beside him waits patiently, arm outstretched, no hint of impatience or judgment in his expression. Just one person reaching out to another on Christmas Eve, offering something that might be more than just what's contained in that small package. The small red box weighs heavily in James's hands. The paper crinkles under his fingers, rough against his calloused skin. He can't remember the last time someone gave him a wrapped gift. The simple act of holding it brings back a flood of memories. Emma's excited face on Christmas mornings, Sarah's careful wrapping of presents late at night, his mother's tradition of letting everyone open one gift on Christmas Eve. Take your time, Keanu says softly, noticing James's hesitation. No rush. He settles back against the bench, his presence steady and undemanding. A police car rolls past on the adjacent street, its blue lights painting the snow in shifting shadows. The sound of distant carolers drifts through the park, their voices carried on the winter wind. James carefully peels back the paper, preserving it out of old habit. Inside, he finds a plain white box. His hands tremble slightly as he lifts the lid. Nestled on a bed of tissue paper lies a key new, gleaming in the streetlight, and beneath it, several folded papers. There's an apartment, Keanu explains, his voice remaining gentle. On Commonwealth Avenue, not far from here. It's yours for as long as you need it. First year's rent is covered. The papers include the lease, already signed by the landlord. You can move in tonight. James stares at the key, unable to speak. The metal catches the light, throwing back tiny reflections like stars. His throat tightens, and he blinks rapidly against the sudden moisture in his eyes. It's not just a key, it's a door opening to possibilities he'd stopped letting himself imagine. I can't, he starts, but Keanu raises a hand. You can, he says firmly. And you're not taking charity. Think of it as an investment in someone who's already given more than most people ever will. He pauses, choosing his next words carefully. I lost my best friend to PTSD. He was Army, 2 tours in Iraq. I watched him struggle with the same battles you're fighting. Never got the chance to help him the way I wanted to. The confession hangs in the cold air between them. James looks at Keanu again, seeing past the famous face to the pain beneath. There's a rawness there, a wound that hasn't fully healed. The actor's eyes hold the same haunted look James sometimes catches in his own reflection. Tell me about your friend, James says quietly, surprising himself. The key rests in his palm, its weight anchoring him to this moment. Keanu's smile is gentle but tinged with sadness. Mike was the kind of guy who'd give you his last dollar if you needed it. Funny as hell, smart too. But after he came back, it was like parts of him were still caught in the war. He'd be fine for weeks, then something would trigger him, a car backfiring, a helicopter overhead. He stops, takes a deep breath. Found him in his garage 3 years ago. I keep thinking maybe if I'd done more, noticed sooner. James nods, understanding the guilt all too well. We lose too many that way. Sometimes the hardest part is coming home, trying to fit back into a world that feels like it's moved on without you. How do you do it? Keanu asks. Keep going, I mean. What gets you through the nights? James considers the question, watching the snowflakes swirl in the light of the street lamps. The other vets, he answers finally. The ones out here with me. We look out for each other, same as we did over there. Different battlefield, same brotherhood. Keanu reaches into his coat again, pulling out a business card. There's a veteran support center 3 blocks from the apartment. They're always looking for peer counselors. People who've been there, who understand. The director's name is Tony. He's expecting your call after the holidays. James takes the card, reading the embossed text. Another door opening, another possibility he hadn't dared to consider. The idea of using his experience to help others, of turning his pain into something meaningful, stirs something long dormant in his chest. Why me, he asks, the question that's been nagging at him since Keanu sat down. There are plenty of other vets out here tonight. Because when I walked through the common earlier, I saw you give your sandwich to Maria by the subway entrance. You took off your extra socks for the young guy by the visitor center. Even with nothing, you're still taking care of your people. Keanu's voice carries absolute conviction. The world needs more of that, especially now. The truth of those words settles into James's bones, warmer than any whiskey. He looks at the key again, then at the business card. Small things, really, but they represent something bigger. A chance to rebuild, to reclaim the person he used to be, to become someone new who carries the best parts of his old self forward. The apartment has a spare room, Keanu adds quietly. In case you ever want to have Emma visit. There's a good school nearby, and a park with a playground just around the corner. The mention of his daughter's name breaks something loose in James's chest. A sob catches in his throat, but he doesn't try to hide it. Keanu's hand comes to rest on his shoulder, solid and grounding, as the tears finally fall, mixing with the snow that continues to drift down around them. The snowfall intensifies as James holds the key, its edges pressing into his palm. Each snowflake catching the streetlight reminds him of Christmas mornings at his parents' house, watching the snow through frosted windows while Emma opened her presents. The memory, usually painful, now carries a whisper of hope. Perhaps next Christmas won't be spent alone. Keanu stands, brushing snow from his coat. Want to see the apartment? It's not far. His offer comes without pressure, a simple invitation that James can decline without judgment. But James finds himself nodding, carefully tucking the key and papers into his jacket's inner pocket. His few possessions fit into one backpack, the story of his life reduced to what he can carry. They walk in comfortable silence through the empty streets. The city feels different now, transformed by more than just the snow. Each step takes James further from the bench that had become his world, toward something he'd stopped believing possible. Near Park Street Station, they pass Maria, still huddled on her heating grate. Wait, James says, turning to Keanu. There are others out here tonight. People who served, who deserve a chance. His voice carries the same tone he once used giving orders in Afghanistan. Decisive, caring for his unit. Keanu's smile broadens. I was hoping you'd say that. He pulls out his phone, taps a few numbers. Tony. Yeah, it's me. Remember that shelter space we discussed? We're going to need all of it tonight. Within minutes, a van from the Veterans Support Center arrives. Maria hesitates at first, but James's presence convinces her. They find Tom behind the visitor center, then the young veteran with the cough. One by one, familiar faces emerge from doorways and shadows, drawn by the promise of warmth and safety. The shelter occupies a renovated brownstone, its windows glowing with warm light. Tony, a barrel-chested former Navy SEAL, greets each arrival personally. The building smells of coffee and fresh-baked bread. Cots line the main room, but there's also a kitchen, showers, and a room filled with donated clothes and supplies. It's not just for tonight, Keanu explains as they watch the others settle in. Tony's been working to expand the program. They need people who understand, who can help others transition back to civilian life. People like you, James. The words sink in slowly, like snow melting into warm earth. James watches Maria accept a cup of coffee with trembling hands, sees the young veteran's shoulders relax as he's handed clean, dry clothes. He recognizes the look in their eyes, the same one he saw countless times in combat, when his men realized they weren't alone, that someone had their back. I kept your apartment papers, Tony says, approaching them. But we've got rooms here too, if you want to stay close. Help us build something. These folks trust you already. That's not something we can train. James feels the weight of the key in his pocket, thinks of the empty apartment waiting on Commonwealth Avenue. It would be easy to take that gift, to focus on rebuilding his own life. But looking around the shelter, he sees more than just people needing help. He sees a new unit forming, a different kind of mission taking shape. The apartment, he says slowly, could it house more than one person? Maybe someone with a family, someone ready for that step. Keanu and Tony exchange glances. Absolutely, Keanu replies. We can arrange that. And there's space here, a small room off the office. Private entrance. Bathroom. Not fancy, but perfect, James cuts in. The decision feels right, settling into place like the final piece of a puzzle he didn't know he was solving. I need to be here. These are my people. The night deepens, but the shelter buzzes with quiet activity. More veterans arrive as word spreads through the homeless community's invisible network. Each new arrival triggers a flurry of activity. Hot food, dry clothes, medical checks for those who need them. James moves through it all with renewed purpose, helping where needed, offering the kind of comfort that can only come from someone who truly understands. In a quiet moment, he finds himself in the shelter's small office, staring at a computer screen. His fingers hover over the keyboard before slowly typing out an email to Emma. No drafts this time, no unsent messages. He tells her about the night, about the changes coming, about missing her, about hoping to see her soon, when he's steadier, stronger, about still being her father, even after all this time. He hits send before doubt can stop him. Keanu appears in the doorway as James wipes his eyes. Tony's ordering pizza for everyone. Real food comes tomorrow, but tonight's a celebration. He pauses, studying James's face. You okay? James nods, surprising himself by meaning it. First Christmas in years that feels like Christmas, he says simply. They return to the main room, where someone has found an old guitar. Maria, it turns out, has a beautiful voice, her Spanish Christmas carols filling the space with unexpected joy. The young veteran's cough eases after proper medicine. Tom shares his surprisingly vast knowledge of classical literature with anyone who'll listen. Each person's humanity emerges as the layers of survival fall away, revealing the individuals beneath. As midnight approaches, James steps outside for a moment. The snow has stopped, leaving the city hushed and clean. He touches the key in his pocket, not to an apartment now, but to something larger. Through the shelter's windows, he can see his new unit, his new mission. The weight of past Christmases lifts slightly, making room for possibility. Keanu joins him, offering another sip from the silver flask. They stand in comfortable silence, watching their breath cloud in the cold air. No more words are needed. Sometimes the greatest gifts aren't things at all, but the chance to become who you were always meant to be. Snow falls softly on Boston Common as James adjusts the wreath on the Soldiers and Sailors Monument. 1 year has transformed not just his life, but the lives of countless others. The shelter, now expanded to occupy 3 adjacent buildings, hums with activity behind him. The bench where everything changed remains, a reminder of how far he's come. Inside his office at the Veteran Support Center, photos cover one wall. Maria leading art therapy sessions, her voice now helping others heal through music. Tom teaching literature classes at the shelter's education program, his knowledge finally finding purpose. The young veteran with the cough, now healthy and working as the center's outreach coordinator. Each picture tells a story of recovery, of lives rebuilt from the ground up. The biggest photo shows Emma's first visit 6 months ago. They'd spent the day at the public garden, feeding ducks and making up stories about the people passing by. She'd been shy at first, but by evening she was helping serve dinner at the shelter, chatting with the veterans like she'd known them forever. Now she visits one weekend each month, her presence lighting up the whole building. Tony appears in the doorway, snow melting on his shoulders. Transport's here, ready to start the Christmas Eve pickup. Their annual tradition, born from that first night, has grown. Instead of one van, they now have a small fleet, each vehicle ready to bring in veterans from the streets, offering them not just shelter, but a path forward. James grabs his coat, a new one, warm and properly fitted. The old Marine Corps jacket hangs framed on his wall, next to his medals. He's not ashamed of his past anymore, either the glory or the struggles. Every part of his journey helps him connect with those still finding their way back. The center's main room has been transformed for Christmas. A massive tree towers in one corner, decorated with handmade ornaments from shelter residents. Tables overflow with food donated by local restaurants. Sarah sent cookies. She's remarried now, but they found a way to be friends, united in their love for Emma. Keanu visits regularly, without fanfare or publicity. He's here tonight, helping in the kitchen, just another volunteer in the crowd. The shelter residents know who he is but respect the quiet way he works. His foundation has expanded the program to 3 other cities, each one modeled on what they built here. Outside, James leads one of the vans through familiar streets. Each stop brings new faces, new stories. Some he recognizes from his own days on the streets. Others are recently homeless, the shock of their situation still fresh in their eyes. He speaks to each one with understanding, sharing just enough of his own story to kindle hope. A young woman in a tattered army jacket catches his eye. She stands like he used to, scanning surroundings with hyper-vigilant precision. "Welcome home, soldier," he says softly, extending his hand. She hesitates, then takes it. Another life about to change. Another story beginning. Back at the shelter, the evening unfolds like a well-practiced mission. Hot showers, clean clothes, medical checks. But more importantly, connection. Veterans helping veterans, understanding flowing between those who've walked similar paths. James watches it all, remembering his own first night here, marveling at how hope can multiply when given room to grow. Later, after the meals are served and the new arrivals settled, James returns to his small apartment above the shelter. Emma's latest artwork decorates his refrigerator. A Christmas card from Sarah sits on the counter. His dress blues hang pressed and ready for tomorrow's ceremony, the shelter's first official Christmas Day celebration. He touches the silver flask on his bookshelf, a gift from that first night. He hasn't needed a drink in months now, but he keeps it as a reminder. Not of darker times, but of how a single act of kindness can ripple outward, touching lives far beyond its original reach. Tomorrow will bring more challenges, more veterans needing help, more battles to fight. But tonight, watching the snow fall on quiet streets, James knows he's exactly where he's supposed to be. Not just surviving but living. Not just receiving help but giving it. The man he used to be and the man he's become have finally found peace with each other. On another Christmas Eve in Boston.